Hello, my name is Ayaz Ali, and I'm going to present the video presentation for assignment 3. So, here the first article or first research paper I'm going to present is Test-Driven Development, the State of Practice. This article has been written in one of the United States universities. Two colleagues have worked on it, Suzanne Hammond and David Ompres. And this article or paper has been published in 50th Annual Southeast Regional Conference in 29th March 2012 in USA. So these researchers, they have two research questions here. That how much acceptance, how much the TDD gained the acceptance in its short lifespan. So they are basically working on how much importance TDD gain in a software industry, or in how many developers they prefer to work in TDD. And second one is also like, what do we know about its effectiveness? So they started this by introducing TDD, where they presented the definitions, few references, and brief history of TDD, and a few steps of TDD. So they start and give the definition is, I think by now we all know, since we worked in TDD. They also give that definition here. That we where programmers are required to write a kind of code like in test, like which must fail, automated test which must fail, and then we just provide just enough of coding to let that test pass, and then rerun it, and that test should pass. First it should fail, and then just write a piece of code just to pass the test, and then run the test again, and it should pass. That's the same definition as we know they provided, and then they provided the Kent Beck's book references when he wrote the first book, and when he was practicing the TDD in early 90s. Also, they went through a few examples of TDD history back, and what they found, it was the earliest evidence they could found. It has been used in 1960s, and one of NASA's project is called Mercury. And then again in 2010 they had this survey where 53 of 293 participants described themselves as a TDD developer of the software software validation or software evaluation or something. Then they again gave one reference about the Beck's book in 2001 when they introduced XP. Then he wrote the second book and provide the more specific, like 5 steps. Write a new test case, run all test cases, and see the new one should fail. Write just enough code to make the test pass. Number 4, rerun the test cases and see all the test cases should pass. And final and fifth step was to refactor code to remove the duplications. So whatever you have the duplications in your code, you remove them and you make the your codes look good. And then I'm sorry, they both of the authors, they gave some previous studies on TDD, or they have been made. Their findings, they are explaining a little bit the findings and based on previous studies. Then in next phase they are discussing the growth of TDD and how it went and what has been newly introduced in TDD field. Then they describe the 3 extensions of TDD, which first was agile specification driven development. It also follows the 5 simple steps, but this is like a same, also like a TDD, but it's like a more merged in it, the design phase, also like working with the TDD and focusing on the design as well. And the second was behavior driven design. And the third one is acceptance test driven development. These was the 3 extensions they have mentioned, and they are the same as a TDD, but they are just also aiding and focusing something like a design and yeah. And then they also, in the end, they also give a future work. They think that this should produce good in future. And they give a 2 future further investigating questions. One was how do we know we are developing the correct functionality in TDD, of course. And this was one question to be investigated in future. And second one was how TDD be given more precise definition and description. So this was, they think these 2 questions should be studied in future. But the weird part of that, it was for this paper for me, it had the background, it has the introduction section, it has a future work, it has a previous studies what have been conducted in this field. But in the end they did not have any kind of conclusion section where of course they have in their brief history and that part we see that this TDD is growing and more it has been accepted. But what I can't see that they have to describe in the end that this is our result, this is our finding. Okay, in the beginning 90s or 60s or 50s or 80, 70, whatever, it was like a this percentage and it's growing and now when in this particular time when we are researching, it gained its importance or its growth, but nothing like that has been described in this paper. The second research paper was studied by Adnan Kasvik. I don't know how to pronounce his name, and Rakesh Shukla and Sasi Kumar Ponikat. This research article was to study the TDD in industrial based and investigate the challenges and experience that. So their research question was a practical based test driven development experiment. So they did two different experiments. One first was academic experiment with the 14 master level students. Some kind of, they have been assigned to develop the solution for the bowling game score problem, and the technique they were using to create the positive and negative test cases, where the positive test cases was the implementation according to the system requirements, where the negative cases was slightly out of or not performing the system requirements. So 127 positive test cases has been produced in academic experiment and only 58 negative test cases. While the effectiveness and the defect was higher of the negative test cases, almost like a 70%, than the by 30% as a positive test cases. So this study, this experiment results was a little bit shocking for them, and then they said it may be because of the inexperience or students or something. So then they further went in the industrial based experiment, and they decided work with the Infosys Limited, which is industry located in Bangalore in India, and their 100 plus participant was willingly participated in that experiment, and they have been divided in 3 groups. The traditional way test last, and second group was TDD, and third group was TDD plus. They all participated, and first week they have been given video instructions how they're gonna perform the experiment, and after the certain time period what they have been decided, only 60 submissions has occurred, and 27 among 60 also has been removed because of incomplete work or less of test cases or wrong test cases or not fulfilling the requirement. So only 33 has been analyzed. So shocking results was again occurred. The positive, the negative test cases was again 30%, and the positive test cases was almost like a 70%, roughly. In all 3 groups, 2 groups, TDD and TDD plus, and traditional was only 25% negative test cases, and 74.82 was positive test cases. But the effectiveness was almost the same, like 71% what we saw in the academic based experiment. So it wasn't it wasn't a huge difference. It was almost like a same, but only traditional way it was like a 64% negative test cases effectiveness, and 35% was positive test case effectiveness. So results was almost the same as academic and industrial based